Hi, everyone. My name is Meg Nelson. I'm a senior strategic communication studies major here at CSB+SJU. I'm also the president of the Indigenous Student Association and a student researcher for the Initiative for Native Nation Relations. I feel very honored to hold these roles, not only for our community here, but also for my family connections to White Earth. I am a second descendant member of White Earth Nation, and I'm very excited to be here today. Let me first read the land acknowledgement. Both the College of St. Benedict and St. John's University occupy the original homelands of the Dakota and Anishinaabe peoples. We honor, respect, and acknowledge the Indigenous peoples forcibly removed from this territory whose connection remains today. St. Benedict's Monastery and St. John's Abbey previously operated boarding schools for Native children. Now, students, faculty, and staff are working to prepare relationships with their Native Nation neighbors. Now, we've all heard this passage read to us in classes and various events, but what does it really mean? Today, we are partnered with the Initiative for Native Nation Relations, the Indigenous Student Association, and HMMI to dig into the creation of the land acknowledgement and the Indigenous history here on campus. On the last page of the program, you'll find a QR code. If you would like to ask any question to tonight's panel, you can use the QR code and it'll link you to a webpage where you can anonymously ask a question in real time. Tonight's panel will be facilitated by Ted Gordon. Professor Gordon teaches in the Sociology Department, Honors Program, and elsewhere across our campuses. Since 2018, Professor Gordon has worked focused on Native American boarding schools, truth and healing. For his work, he has received support from the Minnesota Humanities Center, the McKnight Foundation, the Council for Independent Colleges, and the National Endowment for the Humanities. He has been featured in Minnesota Public Radio and PBS NewsHour. He has also been recognized by Twin Cities Business Magazine on their 2021 list of notable leaders in higher education. Professor Gordon currently serves as the Joe Ferry Professor in the McCarthy Center for Public Policy and Civic Engagement. In 2021, through the McCarthy Center, Professor Gordon founded the Initiative for Native Nation Relations, in collaboration with Native nations to pursue research and service interests in line with the mission of St. Ben's and St. John's. The Initiative for Native Nation Relations, or INNER, has connected students across the campuses with projects that take their learning outside the classroom to advance the goals of Native nations. If you would like to get involved with INNER, the QR code on your program will also take you to a place where you can sign up to learn more about upcoming opportunities. Now please help me welcome Ted Gordon.
Meg, thank you for the great introduction. Thank you all for coming tonight. Now that you're here, I want to tell you the real reason for this event. I want you to meet my heroes. These are folks who, when they recognize that something is wrong, stand up and get to work, take big risks, get into good trouble, make things right. Before I have them introduce themselves, I just want to give you a little bit of context. You just heard Meg Nelson read the land acknowledgement. I assume or hope that you've heard at other occasions before. And in that land acknowledgement, you heard about something called Native American boarding schools. Just 5 years ago, this was pretty much a hidden history on our campuses, as it was across the United States. The purpose of tonight's event is not to provide a history of these schools. We included a short timeline on the program if you want to see some of the dates. But at a minimum here, as a starting point for some context for tonight, we should all be aware that in the late 1800s, the United States Congress reassessed its wars of military conquest against indigenous people. And Congress did the calculation. You could see it in their own notes, as they said that if they wanted to occupy all indigenous land, then instead of using military campaigns, they should weaponize education, separate children from their parents, send them to boarding schools with the goal that one day no one will grow up to identify as Native. To implement this policy, the government funded over 400 American Indian boarding schools. Some of them run directly by the government, others operated by religious organizations. Many of these schools changed significantly over the subsequent decades, some stayed close to the government's agenda, while others adapted government policies to suit their own goals. At each school was the individual staff, some committed to assimilation, some who never should have been allowed around children, and some cared for the children as individuals, even while working as part of a system designed for assimilation. No two schools were alike. No two student experiences were alike. The monastic communities who founded our college and university operated Native American boarding schools, including one right here where we are today at St. John's. And over at in St. Joe, adjacent to what is now the College of St. Benedict, was another Native American boarding school operated by St. Benedict's Monastery. And these communities also operated boarding schools on the White Earth and Red Lake reservations. Today, at our college and university, we're just beginning to learn about this history and see how it's part of a national story. The United States government did not publicly acknowledge this history until the summer of 2021. There was no acknowledgement that this happened until just 3 years ago. And then just last Friday, President Biden formally apologized for the boarding school system. He said, quote, "For our nation, it was too shameful to acknowledge. While the darkness can hide much, it erases nothing. We do not erase history, we make history, we learn history, we remember history so that we can heal as a nation." Unquote. The 4 alum who we will meet here tonight, they came to St. Ben's and St. John's not that long ago, 2018 and 2019. At that time, our campuses were much like the rest of the nation. It was a history that was hiding in plain sight, like a lone photo hanging on a wall in a quad, or a brief mention in a book about our community's histories, but rarely discussed, rarely put in the context of the government's overarching intentions, or inclusive of Native perspectives. And it was these alum, with a handful of others, who helped bring this history to light, co-founding the Indigenous Students Association, and as one of their first acts, issuing a call to action for our communities to address this history. They started a movement that has brought us closer and closer into partnerships with Native leaders, like our other panelists tonight, Joe LaGarde. And these relationships enrich us all today. As the journey to boarding school justice is just getting started here at St. Ben's and St. John's, there are many partners in this work. First and foremost, because of the support of St. Benedict's Monastery and St. John's Abbey, there's unprecedented access to archives holding boarding school records. Nowhere else in North America have monastic communities provided this level of access. Right now, we're in the process of coming up with a plan to digitize over 20,000 pages of records. This isn't happening anywhere else. Believe me, I've checked here. A lot of the success that we've been having in this partnership is really due to their leadership. For tonight, the focus is going to be on those whose leadership has been transformative for our college and university here. 4 young alum, Moses Wiseman, Adri Warden, Faith Gronda, Marissa Johnson, and one long time, if you don't mind my saying that, long time activist, Joe LaGarde, whose generosity with his time and his wisdom has really helped make St. Ben's and St. John's a much better place and really helped us find our way along this journey. So please help me welcome Joe LaGarde, Adri Warden, Moses Wiseman, Marissa Johnson, and Faith Gronda. Thank you all for coming here today. Let's start with some introductions. Joe, I'm looking at your biography and trying to think about what to say if I were to be introducing you. I just thought no one could do it except you. So if you wouldn't mind just talking a little bit about your own history and advocating for Indigenous rights.
Well, I'm Joe LaGarde, whiter than that, basically an activist, I guess, is what they say we are. I know the government raided me like 3 times before because I was an enemy of the government, but in the end, I actually ended up meeting with 3 presidents of the United States. So that's how work goes, sometimes when you have to stay with it. But I was Vietnam when I was young, got out of service, come back, things were changing. A lot of your like the black people, they were on a march. We started, Indians, we started the American Indian movement in Minneapolis in October, actually, of 68. Formed a patrol because the cops were always roughing up our people. And so we built the American Indian movement. And out of that, we, kind of woke up America as to who we were. Before that, we were invisible. In the end, we weren't invisible. The cops were raiding us. So, but we did bring change. I mean, some of it can be hard, some of it, but the work itself was satisfying. We had a lot of my family, my sisters, my nieces, everyone was involved in the movement. Years back, some of my sisters and nieces were part of a group that took over Mount Rushmore. And just waking up America at that time. But we did, went back, a lot of us went back home. Actually, in 78, we decided, a lot of the American Indian movement, we were going to go back home and make changes on our reservation. So I was lucky enough, my brother, his friend, we came back, looked around, and we started a school in my house, which is now is K through 12 and up on the reservation there. Beautiful school now. And so we did put that school together, and that all came out of this one said, well, we were wondering why a lot of the young people were standing around in front of a school building. And we didn't know that school, they'd shut the school down and they'd moved everybody up the road to another town. And so I said, well, what are they doing there? They said they're dropouts. Well, I never had much of an education, so I understand that part of it. That I've only had like 6-8 years of education in my life. But we did start that school, and we started to make change on our reservation, for the better. Down the road, we start running into problems. We're talking about land back. Back in the 80s, we worked and stopped the state or whoever they were coming to bury their radioactive material on our reservation. And we didn't know what was going on at the time. And we could see these here. There were some ways of listening to see what kind of a base you had. And it's okay to bury the old radioactive stuff there. What would have affected everything on this side would have went into the Red River. Other side, the hills would have all been Mississippi. And so they chose this side, but we had to organize at the time. And what we learned organizing with the American Indian movement, we were able to go up into Canada, all along the Red River, and we organized a lot of communities with the help of the local people. And so we were able to stop that, burying that radioactive stuff on the reservation, even though the government at the time had taken $1 million, which is a lot of money back in the 80s. It's still a lot of money, but to allow them to come and bury it there. But we did stop it. We organized, and thankfully a lot of the young people joined us. Down the road, we had bad government. We had a lot like now they holler bad elections, I guess, But we had a lot of our people who we just buried were actually voting. And so we got these lists out, put that on out. And so at that point, they asked me, well, what are we going to do? I said, well, what can we do? So we ended up taking over the government. But at the time, just the buildings, we didn't stop the work or anything. We had several mass arrests. A lot of people joined us at that point when all the grandmothers came over. 30 some of them all went to jail. And that's when everybody come and joined us. We were just crying about nothing, I guess, is what they were saying. And so the change came. We ended up and did some organizing, ended up through the mafia. I took a few hundred people and we went through the mafia out of off the reservation and sent them back to New Jersey and that at the time. And so it was this work that we were doing. Out of that, we work on building a lot of camps. We work a lot with the University of Minnesota. Several of the people that were basically against what we were doing at the time joined us. And so I'm working with some of them now for over 30 some years that are still, few of them are still professors at the University of Minnesota, but they've become, like family to me. We were together so long. But it's just change that we made. We ended up, like I said, I was lucky enough to be able to help overthrow 3 governments and stuff in my life. So it's just work we do. Had I been educated, I may not have done that. I might have took the safe route, but little or no schooling, change has to happen, so you do it.
I think about how lucky we are to get to be able to work with you, and how I guess it was about 3 years ago, as we had a grant with White Earth, with their Tribal Historic Preservation Office to do some oral histories, and their Tribal Historic Preservation Officer, Jamie Arsenault, who wishes that she could be here tonight. We were talking about how do we go? We want to get some oral histories. We want to get to know, to have White Earth community members be able to interview other members of their community about this history. And the center, the Nibby Center for the Rights of Nature that you had already founded, was already doing this work. And that was when we connected about 3 years ago. And then, with what you've been able to share with our students at times that we've been up at White Earth, at the Government Center, or at ceremony, and the times you've been here, we're just so blessed to have you be able to share your wisdom with us. I'd like for the other panelists as well, if you could just introduce yourselves. I know it's a hard act to follow, but really, for your time, some of it maybe interlaps or overlaps with some students here, but generally you've gone long enough that there's probably a lot of new faces in this room, I think.
Bonjour, my name is Adri Warden. I am from the class of 2022 from St. Ben's. I'm from White Earth, Ojibwe, and now I currently work as the Administrative Services Manager at the Indian Health Board of Minneapolis.
Testing. I love doing that. Okay. Bonjour, Anin, Wabanu Dinakwe Indigenous Cause, Nagizian Doodam, Odawa Gavaganing, and Dunjaba.
Hello, everybody. My name is Marissa Johnson. I am Eagle Clan, and I'm an enrolled member of La Coudere Band of Ojibwe and a Red Lake Nation descendant. And I also graduated the class of 2022, and I'm now currently working as the nutrition program coordinator for a native-led nonprofit named Dream of Wild Health based out of Minneapolis.
Kwe Urakwi Jatsi Wenda Ndi. Hello everyone, my name is Faith Gronda. Very happy to be here today. I'm a member of the Wyandot of Anderton Nation in Michigan, and I'm also an alumni, graduated in 2022, and I currently work as the evaluation specialist at the American Indian Cancer Foundation.
Hello everyone, my Yuchta name is Machak, but my English name is Moses Wiseman. I come from the native village of Chifornik, which is on the southwest coast in the YK Delta of Alaska. I am a part of the graduating class of 2023. I'm currently the Alaska Native Language Program Director at the Alaska Institute for Justice, offering language access for Alaska Native residents in Alaska.
Thank you. And just hearing your introductions here, I'm like, you were all just at the beginning of careers and such rock stars. I just really have to say. One thing here that I think might be a good place to start, Joe, I know that we've talked about this as a possibility, is for you to be able to share just a little bit about your people, the Anishinaabe and or also known as the Ojibwe. And if I could have the projector brought down, we'll have got the map from the Shomish book that we'll be able to project right behind you. just in just the kinds of the brief overview that you'd like the audience to know.
Well, you know, a lot of you guys ever read the Mishomis book? No? Anyway, Eddie Benton put out our stories for our migration. And so, and in the book you'll find that the migration they're talking about started maybe 11,000 years ago, maybe 10. But a lot of what I know or learned might take you back 50,000 years, even though people tell us that we've only been here for 16,000 years. But I can tell you, take back stories, old stories that actually science finds that this actually happened. But we started out on the East Coast, and basically what I'm saying is our second migration. The books will tell you it's our first migration. And the reason that happened, what I'm calling the second migration, is we had these, you know, these glaciers, like right up the road up here, like where I lived, the ice was 2 miles thick. So naturally you couldn't live on it, so our people went back. We were here then, and we went back to the East Coast. Tribes down south didn't want us down there. They were pushing us that way, so we went back east. And at the time, there was so much, it took so much water to build these glaciers that the oceans were way down. So our people were actually on what they called banks out there in by Nova Scotia. They were above water at the time, the Grand Banks. And as the glaciers started to melt, naturally the water came up and our people started once more on our migration coming through here. And when you get a lot of that, I'm looking like the St. Lawrence Seaway here. Our stories go that it didn't flow out this way. It actually went out through by Manitoulin Island east of there, and it was the French River, they call it nowadays, and went out through the Ottawa, the great St. Lawrence Seaway. But that all changed when the glaciers melted, and they have what they call calving, where there's big ice dams. And when that broke on Lake Superior, boom, it went. And that's the way it went out now. But at the time, the French River and that, 100,000 years ago, the Great Lakes were actually drying up. And that's what our stories tell us. And the Great Lakes were actually drying up. So our people had a meeting with what they called the giant beavers. And they built a series of rock dams along the French River and the Ottawa River. And after that, the lake started rising, and instead of the French River flowing from west to east, it now flows from east to west, and science finds that these stories that they recorded way back in the 1600s were actually happened. And that's what our people are the keepers of the stories. Each tribe has a different obligation or whatever you had, you know. With us, it was the keeper. So the stories, we don't have the written language, so you couldn't, the stories you were told, you can't change one word in it. And so that, goes back. But that's just a little bit about our migration stories. And we ended up here at Manitoulin Island was our last stop. And up in, Lake Superior up here. And that, we were lucky enough, we just sent a couple schools out there to have ceremony and learn our stories out on Manitoulin Island. So I think that's one of the things I'm going to be doing. And then I'm looking to retire, but I'm also wanting to take and recreate the journey with our young people as a way of educating them, because as we lose our ways, we start taking on other ways, and a lot of that brings a lot of problems that we never had. And so that's one of my hopes are to start educating our young people a little better, and our stories, our values. But with that, we'll let it go.
Thank you so much for sharing that, Joe. If you could raise the projector at this point. To our alum on the panel, As Indigenous students, you came here at a time before there was an Indigenous Students Association. And before our campuses had any discussions about Native American boarding schools. Is there anything that you would like to share with the audience about what led you to want to go and make change here?
So for me, in my experience, when I first got here, I came here early, did college bound, got here. And then when my freshman year, I was lucky enough to know that my cousin, who's class of 2020, if I'm not wrong, Regina Turchik, I came here because she also came here. I was like, oh, we're the only Native students on campus. And then eventually I had, I was invited by Ted, because somehow he found out I was Native, to be a part of a dialogue group for Native American students. And that's where I met Faith over here. And I was like, oh wow, look, another Native student. And we were having conversations about how we can create a more inclusive campus, a more inclusive environment for Native American students. And then eventually, I was like, oh, I asked Ted, I was like, oh, is there more Native students on campus? And I finally met Marissa, and then we were like, oh, we should find a way how we can create more spaces for Native students. And then when we were convening about the Indigenous Student Association, I had met Adri. It's funny how, I haven't done the row. But I thought it was so important to have a space for Native people, because when I first came here, it was a very big culture shock. Came from a village. All I see was Native people, and the only foreign people, or people who aren't of Native looking, were our white teachers who came from the Midwest. Yeah, so that's me.
Hello again. If I remember the question correctly, it was something along the lines of what encouraged us to get started?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. As Ted was mentioning earlier, I'll wait for Moses to get his cough drop out. As Ted was mentioning earlier, we've been off campus for some time now, so there are a lot of new faces. I'm not sure. This is a story that's been repeated before, so if you've heard it, sorry about it. When I was looking at schools, having a Native community that was established was very, very important to me. It was something I really wanted out of my college experience. That wasn't a thing here at St. Ben St. John's. However, I chose to go without that because I really loved this school and I really wanted to be a part of it, and I wanted to make this my home for 4 years. And so I actually toured here like 4 times because I really wanted to make sure that this is where I wanted to be. And so during orientation week, I was walking through the Great Hall and I found a photo of students, Indigenous students who were at boarding school, and there were, a few, I don't remember the picture exactly, it's been a while, I try not to think about it, white priests looking like on either side. And so to see that, it was a very big shock because I had no knowledge of that at all. I was very appalled to see that. This place that I had just chosen to make my home for the next 3 to 4 years, suddenly now what, And so, and it was displayed very prominently amongst other Johnnies having fun playing in Lake Sag, playing out in the snow, having a wonderful grand time. And to see that smack dab in the middle was heartbreaking. And so that was really what catapulted me into wanting to start the Indigenous Student Association, along with any other Native students that were here, because I didn't know that there was any here either. And so I met Ted through a decolonizing your syllabus workshop for professors. I was the only student there. I was promised fry bread. I did not get it. I still hold a grudge. I'm still waiting, Ted. And so him and I got connected, and then he connected me with Balin Benway, another alumni, who unfortunately was not able to be here tonight. So her and I really hit the ground running, and so she was traveling abroad, and I had drafted up the constitution for ISA, and Ted connected me as well with Faith and Moses, and we had really kind of gotten this thing running, gotten our board member position situated, had a meeting or two, and then it was wonderful because it was doing one of the things that we had imagined, and that was bringing in Native students. And through that, we got to meet Adri as well. And it's funny, actually, 'cause we were having an event, another panel with ETL, and you had messaged me asking to be a part of that. And that was really amazing to see that it was bringing in, people, and it was getting attention, and it was getting to do one of the things that we really envisioned it to do. So.
Well, what led me for change is honestly Ted. Ted, I don't know if you remember this, but he put together a dinner for Native students or who identified as Native, and I had the opportunity to sit and eat with you and Balin. I think that was like freshman or sophomore year.
'Cause you were first year at the time.
Yep, yeah. So that really got me interested and sparked to know that there were other Native students here, and that I wasn't the only one, because I had come from Anoka High School, which in the Anoka Hennepin School District, we have a very robust American Indian education. So essentially, any Native students are pulled out of class to learn about their culture, separately away from regular class. And so I had become accustomed to continually learning and being around other people that were like me, and coming to CSB+SJU, it was a little bit of a cutoff, I would say. But thanks to Ted for being extremely passionate in this cause. He led other Native students to each other, and that led us to do the work that we were able to start.
Similarly, I was also connected through Ted. I remember he came to speak at a group I was a part of, and so then I emailed him and had a meeting with him. But yeah, I also had no knowledge of our institution's history of boarding schools until I talked to Ted, and that's just very jarring information to hear, and then it makes you wonder, how was I here for an entire year and had absolutely no knowledge of this history? And from talking more, it just really appeared that this history was being pushed under the rug for a reason. There are a lot of people who didn't want it to come to light because maybe they didn't want to deal with that history, but it's a really important history to acknowledge, and there are ways to move forward, and there is a duty to work with the communities that were harmed so gravely, and ask for what they want and how they can be supported. And so that's really, what pushed us to do this work, is because we found it very unjust that this history wasn't known, and we really felt that something needed to be done about it. And then also we wanted to create spaces for Indigenous students, because we had all felt very isolated coming here and really didn't want other Native students in the future to have to deal with that, because it's just not something we wanted anyone else to have to go through. So we really put our heads down and worked for the rest of our college experiences. But we went through a lot, but it's really great to see the changes that have been made.
I want to follow up with another question, though. But first, just with an observation, and really a point to clarify, Moses, something that you had said. You came up to me Right? And so no, that's the point that I want to share. There's a pattern I want to share in this, okay? Because you're like, stop how Ted found out I was Native. Well, so we had a Peace Studies conference here, if you remember that, 2019. And so I was we were just getting started with this work. And so we presented a little bit of what you found, and you came up and you introduced yourself to me. And so kind of one of the points that I want to share here is that really each of you did something where you, like Faith, that I got an email out of the blue from you in your first year. Marissa, you came to an event for faculty training. And then when I was chatting with you afterwards, you were like, I want to found an Indigenous Students Association here. And I was like, cool, thank you. But I mean, you know, and Adri, like you responded to that invitation, right? We're working with Brandon Woodard at the time, and you were able to go and also connect with Balin. And so each of you kind of you selected to go and be part of this. But also, as part of that, which I know was really, really hard, is you were around the same time also beginning to learn about this institutional history. I want to just share a little bit, you know, in terms of some of the things that you've called for. And to be clear, there is a lot more work to be done. I'm not, when I read off some of this, it's not to suggest that the work is finished. We're in the very first steps of this work getting done. But it was in spring of 2021, in partnership with Extending the Link, that and it's one of your first acts as a club that you held a panel where you expressed a lot of your experiences, a lot about how hard a lot of this was, and you issued a call to action at the time, and in that, and I'm saying this so some of you in this room are aware of some of this history here. You asked for there to be a land acknowledgement that acknowledges the boarding schools. And you actually went out to the faculty senate and presented and made the case, which is not easy for anyone to present to the faculty senate, I will say, as a faculty member. And you did it as students. And you got that. So it's because of their work that it's in the cultural and social difference classes that is to be read aloud and discussed. Is there more work to be done on that? I think absolutely there is, but they're the ones that got that started. They called for the student senates to create positions focused on decolonizations, and we have those positions now. We have one of the representatives right here, Colton, right? And so it's like, where did this come from? The change, you got the student senates to change those roles, which is not an easy thing to do, and. You know, and you also called for there to be some kind of a center or some kind of an organization, campus organization, focused on service and research, focused on tribes. Well, it's just getting started now, but that's the roots of the Initiative for Native Nation Relations. You also called for a presidential task force. And the Native Nation Task Force is, you know, that continues on. It was your call that got that started, and it has it has representation at the highest levels of the leadership from the monastic and the college and university communities here. And so that work got kickstarted by all of you. One thing that I do want to say, though, is that this is work that you shouldn't have had to do, because you just came here to be students, and you certainly, you could share whatever it is you want, and you certainly don't have to, but anything you might want to say about just what it was like to be kind of carrying on two burdens at once. The work that everybody here has as being a college student, but also of not just finding your people, but then organizing and getting other people educated and getting other people to work towards change. If there's anything that you wanted to share about that.
Also, shout out Extending the Link. They have a podcast on Spotify. You can hear our interviews on there. And also, thank you, Ted. I forgot that there was a Peace Studies conference that our friend Dr. Gross was also there. And my cousin was actually supposed to present, but she wasn't able to make it and she was supposed to present with Ted. What was the question again?
So, just if you've already shared some of what got you motivated to want to see change, anything you want to say about like the experience of being a student, which is stressful enough as it is. You all know that in this room, but then also organizing to make change here.
Honestly, I never thought of it that way because, like, you know, you say, oh, we're not supposed to do the work, but in reality, if coming from an Alaska Native culture of the Yupik culture, it's our way of life. I mean, we have to constantly fight for ourselves. We have to constantly fend for ourselves. You know, I know it's not the work. We're not like, you know, it shouldn't have to fall on us, but at the same time, who's gonna listen to us? It's our experiences that help make the change go the right way, because when we watch somebody else do it and we don't like it, we're not gonna have a voice for it. So like, I mean, that's me.
It was really difficult. I think I can, speak for all of us when I say that. There was being a student and then also feeling like you had a full-time job that you weren't getting paid for. That was very emotionally draining. It was really difficult. I felt so grateful to have my friends here. I felt like we really supported each other through that and got through it together. But it was very difficult, especially when, there's a history that people who were higher up at the time very obviously didn't want to acknowledge. And so also being able to figure out where you can go to make change, and recognizing that some people may tell you one thing but won't follow through, or will direct you to someone else and don't actually want you to be able to create the change. And so we ran into so much of that throughout our time here, which is why we felt that it was so important that we got those calls to action done, because we were so nervous that once we graduated, what was going to happen? If we leave, are people going to think that, oh, we can just forget about this again? And so we fought really hard, because also we had already been through so much emotional labor, and we didn't want other Native students to have to go through everything that we went through and start from the ground again. And so we really did our best to push through, and we're so grateful for the people who did support us and came on board and really listened to us. That was really all we ever wanted, was for people to listen to us and acknowledge what we were saying and join us in the action we wanted. And so it was difficult, but looking back and hearing what has been accomplished so far, we feel very grateful for that, and also know that there's still a lot that needs to be done, and this work still needs to have a large focus.
Yes. Okay. So, yes, it was very difficult, and truthfully, Faith and I were reflecting earlier this week on what did we do? What did we actually do? And because when you're in the thick of it, it's hard to recognize truthfully what you're doing, because you're not thinking about how this will look, what the impact will be later on. You just kind of want to get it done now, like with the land acknowledgement. I mean, we spent hours and hours and meetings after meetings making sure that that language is exactly how we wanted it to be, making sure it was very intentional, as an example. And truthfully, and although it wasn't very studious of me, during the block schedules and Zoom calls and classes, I remember, having to work on presentations for presenting to senates, presenting to, CSB Senate, the staff, faculty senate, having to double work, which is exhausting, and then additionally having an on-campus job, which is another job. And so, yes, I think it's truly amazing what we've been able to do, and I'm very excited to see where this work will continue to go and grow, and the students that will be able to be involved with this, that won't have to write a constitution or, advocate to the Senates or do a million other things that we had to do. But I'm very grateful to have those, around me that were with me in it, as well as our non-Indigenous, friends and supporters and staff, because they really made it. And so, yes, we did. It's wonderful to hear Ted list all the things that we called for in the call to action, but it's also important to recognize all the work that went into each of those. And so, yes, it was difficult.
I know we're running a little bit low on time, so I'll keep my thing short. But I think Marissa and Faith and Moses all said it perfectly to a T. The student experience that we all had was more of a joint student experience. We were essentially activists, students, and student workers all at the same time. So it can be extremely stressful, but it is also so rewarding to see the work that was put in and how it's reflected now.
Thank you for sharing all that. And as you're sharing that too, I'm thinking about, Joe, as you just went over, your everything that you'd faced as an activist and fighting for the rights of your people. That I'm thinking about kind of the work that you were all working on towards on these campuses here, and then getting able to meet and connect with Joe, and kind of see this is all work that you shouldn't have to do, but there's also a lot of role models out there, like Joe, who showed how you can really do this work in a good way that makes real change. We have gotten some questions in, and you can keep them coming. We do have some more time to take in some of the questions from the audience through that QR code that's on the panel. I've got two questions that ask basically the same kind of questions, so I'm just going to bring them together. And again, this is open for for anybody who wants to respond to this question here. I'll phrase it this way, going off of kind of one of the questions here. Do people living today have a responsibility to address historical harms even if they didn't personally commit them? And I imagine because that's being asked in the context here of about talking about Native American boarding schools.
Can you repeat the question?
So, do people today have a responsibility for historical harms that they maybe didn't personally commit? If anyone wants to take that question, what responsibility may one have? I don't know if I've been looking at you, Joe.
Okay. Well, do they have a responsibility when something is wrong, has been wrong? You have that responsibility to make it right. That would be the thing. How do we go ahead and bring change? We have to educate one another, work with one another, and that's how change comes about. But yes, they do have that responsibility.
Yeah, I would definitely agree with Joe on this. Yeah, I feel like that's a big question, but in my mind has a very obvious answer. There are many people who have benefited from the wrongs that have been committed against people in the past, and just because you weren't maybe the person who committed that wrong, it's still unjust to just sit by and let that happen and not do anything about it. And so, yeah, like for example, with the history of boarding schools, yeah, I feel like it would be ignorant of anyone to try and remove themselves from that history and say, hey, well, like I wasn't around then, I didn't do that. Like this history had very deep and tragic impacts on a very large population, and it was a tactic that was used to commit genocide against an entire population of people. And so yeah, you can't just sit by and say, well, like that happened a really long time ago. That's just, yeah, I would say it would be ignorant to do that, and people should always be looking to find justice in these situations and lift up people who have been harmed. I think that also plays into empathy and wanting the world to be a better place and supporting those people who suffer from the impacts of what has happened in the past. And also, the impacts of those things still affect people today. Like Indigenous peoples are still affected, and they're still, maybe it's not in as obvious of ways or things like that, but there are still many things that people are suffering from and being affected by. And so it didn't just happen in the past, it's still happening today, and we still need to deal with these things.
Thank you. I'm thinking as well that specifically for our institutions, our mission calls us to education, to service. And so, you know, it's part of the call of who we are for our communities. I also want to say as well that, you know, sometimes when talking about historical justice, historical injustices, there's a frame that I'll hear people make sometime that I'm sure maybe some people in this room have heard of. Oh, people wondering, should I feel guilty about something I didn't do? And one thing that I'll add to this is that I'm not sure if guilt is a feeling that people are asking for, or productive of emotion for this, but really grief. When people share their pain and loss with neighbors or classmates or students, share something that they're grieving over. What do you do to support someone who's grieving? Do you sit with them? Do you ask what you can do to help? Certainly, what wouldn't seem to be right would be to tell them that they shouldn't talk about what they're grieving about. And I think what we're seeing here too is that there's so much positive work that can be done to really benefit everyone out of this work here. And so, you know, one question I have for you, Joe, is you did a lot of work with colleges. You started out, if I heard you tell your story correctly, you know, talk about your experience. You started out challenging the government, having the government come and challenge you right back. And a lot of your work right now is geared towards working with college students. Why is that?
Well, not only working with college students, it's about educating ourselves and people around. One of the reasons I actually got drawn into working with the University of Minnesota through a friend of mine, and I started, at first I'm wondering, what am I doing here? You know, what am I going? I don't have an education, everybody's, you know, they can't understand their language half the time because but change, you know, had to come, and I find, you know, like with me, I never had an education, so I make sure my kids have an education. I make my granddaughters, I have 2 granddaughters in their 3rd year of college right now. Hopefully I'll have a couple more in college, but it's just work that we have to do, but we also work on educating one another. I mean, I learn as much from the students as, you know, hopefully they learn a little from what I can do, you know. But it's all about working together, educating one another, and just have that respect and that for one another, regardless if we see things different, you know. It's always good to have, it's nothing wrong with looking at something different. I mean, it's really good, it's a good thing. Otherwise, where would we be, huh? If we didn't question things once in a while, or question ourselves. But yeah, no, I enjoy working with young people. In fact, we just, a few weeks ago, September, we had over 40 students up at Itasca, mainly teaching them the rice. I work on protecting our monomen, it's a sacred food for our people. It's actually the 3rd prophecy of our people. And so working with University of Minnesota, we were able to have this 23 years now we've had a rice camp with them. We're looking at Carleton now wants to join us. doing some work in Morris. So hopefully, even if I'm retired, I'll be able to help put some of these programs and help them, build some, just some good education pieces.
Well, and those experiences are so meaningful for everyone involved, right? I mean, in terms of this question here of kind of, what responsibilities people have. It's also, when we think about here, as you're sharing kind of the work you're engaging others in, how much that benefits all of those students who are getting involved in this. I want to paraphrase a question that came in here that's for you, Joe, which is, I think many members of this community here know that there were 4 boys who were just returned from the cemetery here to White Earth, including one of Joe's relatives. Why is it important or meaningful or helpful for families to be able to learn about the experiences of their relatives and be able to connect with whatever information they're able to find about them for relatives who went to boarding schools? How is that? If you could just tell, I think we understand in a sense of why it's helpful, but if there's anything that you'd be willing to share,
I think that one of the main things is, we all want our people home, right? Nobody wants to leave their family behind. And that is one of the main things. And so I really want to thank the group here, the students, everyone that's been able to help brought my relative home. We just finished the Spirit House, those that know, this past weekend, and so I actually had a couple of my John's relative, his name was John Parker, that we buried. They came out from California. Had they known that we were having that the other week, they would have came for that. But they came out just to our ceremony and up at the Spirit House here this past weekend. But the work itself is important, because like I say, nobody wants to leave their people behind. They're your people. And so, and a lot of my family, they were so happy. A lot of our people, we're a little quieter. We watch things. I'm probably one of the louder ones in our people. But they come up there all expressing, gratitude. Thankfully, Jamie Arsenal, that headed up all this work, they were so happy that she, could stay with it. And I and her have been kind of working together on different things. Right now, we're looking at a little more history that we want to put together. But the work itself is important. I don't know how to explain it. It brought so much happiness to my relatives to be able to, even though they didn't make it to the burial, a lot of them, were, and a lot of my people just don't have the money to travel, so, but they did make a lot of phone calls. I could show you my phone. People calling and just saying, how can we be a part of this? Can we, and I said, well, we'll be having a memorial dinner in a year, I said, and we'll have a large gathering. I'll get a hall up there to have our gathering for the people that were buried up there. And it's really, and actually, this is the first time, like my relative John, that was the very first one that ever come out of a non-government school for burial, very first. And I don't know if that's even happened up in Canada. I haven't heard anything about it. I asked a friend of mine up there, he said he didn't know. So that's a lot of good work that this group, young people, has got started here.
Hey, I'm so glad that boy John Parker is home and back in his land and back where he should be. And to think as well, the different elements. There's a lot of work that went into this, right? And this was a request that came from the White Earth Tribal Government to the Native Nation Task Force over the summer, which is something that you all called for us to start. And a lot of the research as well, students have been very involved in that. And a lot of that was supported by the Initiative for Native Nation Relations. And you would call for there to be that work done here, service and research done at the request of tribes. And so even though you're all off starting your careers and doing fantastic work, kind of as this was taking place here, it's some of the work, some of the legacy of what you left here made that process easier here because we had already started to build that infrastructure that you had fought for. One last kind of a question here, which is, what else do you want us to know? I'm going to ask a big open-ended question here. We have a couple of other questions that came in, mostly kind of visions for the future. So it could be anything that you might want to see here down the line. Think big, think small, whatever it is, or anything else that you want to share with us at this time.
That's me again?
That's all of you.
Okay. Well, it's hard to add on to the great work that's being done here. I mean, like I said, this is a first of it, And back home, people were just, they didn't believe it was happening at first, They thought, it's not going to happen. But it did, thanks to the schools, St. Ben's over there. But I would just want to keep up the work, but I would like to see, like the university and that. They come right out and we work out in the field, or what's he called, the field, And a lot of people are hands-on. I'm sure that would benefit this school too, to do some work. A lot of our camps we have, like I said, it's a rice camp. Sometimes we just have storytelling camps, mainly in the winter. Some stories we can talk about, some we can't. But just that type of work, but get involved more with your communities. Don't be afraid, like the young people did here. Set up and made a change. This is the first time this has ever happened. So I'm so happy that my relatives are all happy. And not only my relatives, other ones are all coming up and they say, we're going to get more, and more come. I said, possibly.
We'll work on that. We got to make it happen.
Quite possibly. I said, I hope it can continue. I said, and before I go on, and before I forget, I want the Native or Indians or whatever, descendants, all that, to take a look at. It's called the Earl and Kathy Hoagland Scholarship Fund. Take a look at that. We help. Our office is at St. Thomas down in St. Paul. So you'll find it under Catholic Rural Life that we have the funding under. But take a look at that. We're able to help pay for classes if needed. We send students like Morris, a couple students went to Italy to look at receding glaciers, because we work on protecting the Monoman water environment. But I'd really like for people to take a look at that, because that's our whole goal, is to help reach out. And that's what I set that up for, put that together for, was to try to help our young people and keep them in school, because we're going to need all that.
Thank you, Megwitch Joe. Thank you so much for sharing that. Anyone else have any parting thoughts or ideas you want to share?
Of course we do.
Go for it.
We're just trying to, figure it out silently by staring at each other.
It's okay.
Megwitch Joe, for those kind words. We love to be here, and we especially love to be around you. I could listen to you all day long for years and years. But moving forward, I think one thing that I would like to see really is this work continue on. I'd like to see, any roadblocks that current students are experiencing, maybe we do away with some of those, if not all of them, to really get this work, even more up and off the ground and even more continuing. I would love to see some fry bread somewhere on campus.
I owe you that.
Someday.
It was a bait and switch, wasn't it?
No. Close.
Gosh. I'm heartbroken. Anywho. And then, two, I think what would be really incredible, and one thing that I really loved about going to school here is the gorgeous, gorgeous land that the schools sit on. Being able to have space here, current students, alum, members of White Earth, things like that, to really involve community and have community make steps to really getting together for gatherings, I think is very important. And then also too, like support for current and future students. What's being done to really support those students, Indigenous and non-Indigenous students who want to be involved in this work. What's being done to sustain this work, and also too, what's the fun stuff that's happening for students beyond the work, beyond the researching. Yes, Ted's got a flyer for you all.
Quick plug here. Powwow this weekend at Apollo High School. The link will take you there. The ISA is also running a shuttle. So in terms of fun things coming up this weekend, follow the ISA for other fun stuff.
Yes, yes. So those are some few things.
I think for me, I'm very fond of education. I love, supporting people to get their degrees, I think it's very, very important. And I know that our schools, they have pipeline schools, we have students coming from the Bahamas, we have students coming from Texas, mainly like prep schools. How can we encourage our administration to create pipelines to welcome Native students into our schools to create a more good space, Like tomorrow I'm presenting to a class, to an English class about how, how people who are either Native or other ethnic identity view things, not just a very, like a monolith way. How can we create that?
I guess what I want students, faculty, and staff to know, students, you can use your voice and people will listen to you. We used our voice and there is change happening now. Obviously, there are always going to be pushbacks. There are always going to be things in the roadblocks that will push you, but you just have to keep going because that is what your voice is for. But also at the same time, faculty and staff, sometimes listening to those student voices is necessary because necessary change happens when we get to listen to a different viewpoint. Don't be afraid to use your voice, but also take time to listen.
I would, echo all of these thoughts. I think it's also important to note that this work happens and because so many people started talking about it, people got involved, conversations were being had, and it's really important that that continues. Have conversations with your friends, with your family members. This work moves forward when people care and people stay engaged with it. And that's really what we found is finally when we got to have a more public platform, that's really when we saw some doors start opening because, people were forced to care about it because more people knew, more people were talking, and you couldn't push this under the rug anymore. And so every change happens when a group of people really cares about something and continuously talks about it, and that's also how change continues. And so, we just really want to leave you with that, and thank you guys all so much for being here.
Any of you here that's interested in getting involved in any way, seriously, the Indigenous Students Association puts on amazing, really fun events here. And I want to say as well that as you created this, right, and you're doing this work here, it's that, your first kind of act was to have this call to action. And then after that, I remember you saying, like, create this task force, create these Senate positions for everyone else to do the work. So the ISA could just have movie night and just do fun stuff. Go and sponsor a powwow. And I really encourage you all to go and come out and check it out. And I will also say, if any of you really want to get involved in this work, you can get in touch with me. You can use that QR code to drop a to put in your name as well. And the Initiative for Native Nation Relations, we are going to be putting out a call for new student workers soon as well. So like, if you want to get involved, like you can do this. Like, and actually, all the students doing the work right now are seniors, so I need help. But really, I mean, think about everything that everyone on this panel has been able to accomplish, but also. That work to be done, they lit that torch and are passing it on to you to go and get involved. Thank you, everyone on our panel here. Joe, Adri, Marissa, Faith, Moses, thank you so much for coming out. Thank you, everyone here, for coming here tonight.